thing there. The back chucks are put there. They could be negative, neutral, or positive. So the charge and we talked about how you create a mental seed in the previous classes. How do you do that? You do an action of mind, speech, online, and they can come in 3 flavors: chocolate, vanilla, banana. Negative, neutral, or positive. And that is what determines when the buck chuck opens into your consciousness of I. By the way, it's the same for all the other consciousnesses. For your sound, for your hearing, the eardrum will move, vibrate, and tingle, the whatever thing is called. But then and then it sends the electrical signal to the brain. But then what lays upon those chemicals and the electrical signals, the whole consciousness of what's happening? It's only what your internal consciousness has available to match that thing. So, if this is how things work, and you want to manipulate this thing, then a whole bunch of questions should be arising in your mind. Let me make sure that I've covered everything that I need to cover. We talked about the object being just colors and shapes, and even the Madhyamika Prasangika, unfindable, because this is what our mind wants to. This is the great ignorance that we slash when we practice these things properly. We want to find unequivocal proof that there is a self-existent something. Something definitely exists separate to my reality. The reality is that you're having internal perceptions. Not only that, if you don't even think the whole consciousness thing, if you think we are just, and there's this view in the world, that we are just chemicals and electrical signals sparking off in the brain, that's what creates our awareness. Where does light come from if that's inside your brain? If you are perceiving from inside your brain, which is pitch black, and the stuff is going off, the sparks are going off, and the chemicals are flooding, how do you see light? You're not seeing what the eye is seeing. You're seeing the spark of the signals that were sent from the eye. It's not light that you're seeing. You're having an awareness, a consciousness arise. That's luminescence. It's got something, yeah? No. You sure? Okay. So according to mine only, Bhakchats. By the way, for those of you who are Sanskrit interested, have you heard the word Alyana Vishnyana? Have you heard that word? No. I've heard it a couple of times. That's what the Kuchi is. Yeah? 2 more consciousness, Prasangika, for example. Mind only, close to what's actually happening. Emptiness, I told you about. So let's talk about, for a second, the other mind streams. How can you and I share in our perception of the yelling boss? So this is just happening in your consciousness, yeah, or your consciousness, and then it happens in your consciousness. You both see the yelling boss yelling at me. You're both happy, yeah. From your point of view, you're happy. I got fired. You see the same round face, you see the same round shape, and you have a joy, a positive charge. According to this, that came out of you doing some goodness before, connected with yelling. Yeah? I love you! And then you experience the yelling boss's joy that I'm on fire. Why do you have the same perception and I have the opposite?
Because you're really kind of a jerk around the office.
Because I'm really a self-existent jerk around the office. It can't be. Because if I am a self-existent jerk, everybody must see me as a jerk. I don't. I'm one of the everybody's. Yeah? And I'm not crazy and I'm not deluded and I'm normal.
It's like I don't want to say collective karma or anything, but is that coincidence?
And you can say collective, shared karma. Yeah? And then this is a beautiful, that's good. You can say shared karma, collective karma. You could say that we did things similarly, like sitting in this room, we're all doing this similarly. with some kind of close intent, similar intent, it must produce the experience of a group of us having a similar thing. And I tell the story when I used to debate on the dry pond of Madison and Fifth Avenue with Winston and Christie. We used to sit there and debate to practice these ideas, to try and break them down. And we're debating something about lives or whatever, I can't remember exactly. Kind of we were debating. And this, as I'm talking to them, my mind's a little confused, and I look up and there's this flock of pigeons, and they're all like about to land on my face, and they're like stop, and they're like hovering, and I'm watching this motion from them, and they're having this whole sensory experience that's similar to them, of suspended in the air, and then they moved down. They started doing the walk, with their neck. Now imagine, from their point of view, this world, they just had a similar experience, a similar ripening, a collective ripening, similar, not exactly the same, but close enough to call it the same, of this experience. And how come their perspective of this place was so different to my perspective? First of all, from their point of view, moving fast and then slow, moving fast as they walked. I mean, they had this whole motion around them. That they shared in that forced perception. They see the world through that point of view. And I've got an insight into collective karmas. These beings together had a similar ripening, a similar experience, because they had similarly painted, or had intended the same thing, or had habituated, had habituated the same action over and over. And so that's fun. That's fun to experience. So collective karma is good, or shared karma. And then the question is, where did you think the karmic seed was stored anyway? All these years that we've been talking about karma, where did you think it went? If it's not in the nominal me or in the mind-only school, the Kunchi, where did you think it went? We must have thought something. You think it went and hung out in a self-existent Mars, and then came back, pushed the self-existent boss to be a shithead, and then made him yell at you? Really, when we're talking about these ideas, what do we really think was happening? Why do we experience suffering when there's no suffering from its own side if you investigate it? And where does that sit? So this explanation is lovely insofar as it places the full responsibility on you. If your world is truly coming from your storehouse, whether that's in the nominal me or if you want to understand it in this pool of actions, this is where your world comes from. How do you change it? This is the important part. If this is how it works, then how do you shift it? How do you force? And this is enlightenment. If this is true, you could have the right bakchas burst into an experience of I'm completely without suffering. And it's true for you. It's not like it's not true. That boss that you perceived as a yelling boss still hurts you or fires you. Still controls your paycheck. It doesn't mean that because it's an experience from your mind, the consciousness arises, labeling from the present view, labeling from the mind-only school, apprehending things to be a certain way. It doesn't mean they're not that way. It just explains how they appear that way. How else did you think they appear? Out there, separate to you, and when you investigate that, you can't find it. So if this is getting at the source of your matrix, then how do you work with that? And that's how you become enlightened. You find the bakchak, so you don't know how many bakchaks you have that are black or negative. You know you got some positive ones because you're experiencing some pleasure. It's funny, we were just talking about the pleasure that I didn't know I was experiencing from having a functioning shoulder. I didn't know I had a pleasure. It was nice to move my shoulder. I can't move it past that point. That was me burning off shoulder karma. That's one distinct bakcha that you have with the capacity to move. it's very nice to move. You're burning off positive karmas. In the storehouse of your karmas, in the storehouse of what produces your world, this is a pleasure. We're so used to it, we don't call it a pleasure. So what are we doing on this planet? We're consuming mountains of virtue, mountains of goodnesses that we created. Now, we also have a storehouse of ignorant karmas, ignorance that produces our suffering. So, how do you turn that around? How do you don't know how many karmas are in your storehouse that are positive and how many are neutral and how many are negative. You can guarantee you're using up a whole bunch of good ones. It's just like a credit card debt. Yeah, you're swiping continuously. I lost my swipe on the shoulder, right shoulder. Yeah, oops, ran out for a few months at least, hopefully. Yeah. And the key is if this is how our world is experiencing a yelling, angry, active, real boss, in all essence, real for you, creating your world, the last thing you want to do is yell back at it with anger and motivation to hurt, which produced it in the first place. The last thing you want to do, understanding this system, is plant the exact same causes that produced him in the first place. So what do? Is it pleasurable to be yelled at by the boss? No. Once the karma is ripening, too late. It's coming. But what you can do, here's your free will, what you can do is choose your response. You have choice about how you respond. And the deep and the highest extraordinary motivation, the more of that you have, the more likelihood that you're going to get that action back in this lifetime. And the more you make that boss the highest object, the more you're probably going to have a result in this lifetime. So how to stop yelling bosses, how to stop poverty, how to stop suffering. Every karma that appears to you, you choose your response. This is why morality works. This is why the whole idea of morality works. Not because there's some self-existent goodness in doing a moral deed. Just doing it will help you a little bit, but if you're doing it with ignorance, it will just come and go. If you're doing it with full understanding, full awareness of where it comes from, you charge it up. It produces a non-breakable, I don't want to say self-existent, but a strong result, a permanent result. Because you're dealing with the DNA of your reality. So you get a yelling boss yelling at you, you refrain from yelling back, you suffer the consequences, or you avoid and dodge a few of the things, but the last thing you do is you plant more negativity, either lying or hating or whatever. You recognize, I must have done that to someone in the past. It didn't feel so good.
Yeah, which past, if you already know that you haven't done any bad karma at this point.
In this life?
Yeah, in this life. Such bad as something that is going towards us in this life.
Yeah.
In this life. And it's like everything's just making sense if we put our past
absolutely.
that we have done into our past lives in this body.
So how do you define whether an experience is pleasurable, like whether you carry a positive or a negative thing? How do you define that? If you carry a positive or negative karma in this system?
I don't know what it is. I don't know how to.
The fact that you suffer from it, it was negative. The fact that it gives you pleasure is labeled positive. Yeah. The fact that you're neutral means it's neutral. Yeah. And it's funny because the answer, it's a loop answer. It's not a judgment. This is why the whole discussion about an external God and so on came at the beginning of this thing. It's not a judgment by some arbitrary person that decided to give you cancer all of a sudden just because they wanted to hurt you, or it's not that. This is saying This is saying it's up to you. If you're experiencing suffering, it can only come from your consciousness. You must have done it. You can't get out of it. You're fully responsible for everything that happens to you. But that's freeing as well as binding.
But let's say this knowledge is just giving you opportunity and giving you chance to not correct further negativity in your future lifetime.
Or this one, if you're doing it correctly.
Or this one, if you're doing it correctly. But what you have done in your past,
you've got
it's
no
already
memory.
been done. So you cannot get out.
Well, you're carrying it. It actually produces this world. Remember how the karmas, let's say karmas that were produced in the last lifetime, how are they manifesting now? There's 4 ways. The environment is one. So you're in an environment conducive to those karmas popping up. You're in an environment where you're going to be yelled at by your boss all the time. If you yell, that's one, according to this system. The other one is you have the propensity to yell at people. Yeah? You want to yell at them all the time. You're angry at them. What was the other one?
The ripening of it.
The ripening, nami, and there was another one.
There's 2 corresponding, right?
Corresponding and
habit.
habit.
Similar
Experience. So the yelling will produce more yelling. Yeah.
And don't kill your mom and dad. Oh wait, that's a different.
So the answer is a loop answer. You can't tell what you did before. You can only determine what you did before by the nature of your experience right now, according to this. Sorry. But that's a good answer. That's a perfect answer.
Yeah.
Because it places responsibility on you. Not some external force, not some unchanging force.
And you know what? I think saying, "Oh, it comes from my past life," is kind of a way of also like not taking responsibility for it. You know, like the idea that karma grows, which we haven't specifically covered, but you could also be seeing a negativity and say, well, I've never really acted this insane before, but I've certainly yelled at people. Yeah, I've certainly yelled at someone before. Yeah. So.
And then you just get something like you're with something that's definitely not, something in your this time nature. That like, what is this coming from?
Right.
It's
Right.
It's definitely something that goes on in the heart.
I think there's something powerful just in looking for the recognition, and saying like, have I done anything like this before? And even if it's not to the same scale, like most of the time we can say, yeah, I've done something shitty like this before.
Yeah, it's like,
But this is how it moderates your behavior, which allows you to see yourself recording the correct behavior, which should, over time, produce a better life than what you're experiencing, if you're doing it correctly. Yeah? A couple of things I need to cover, I'll do them quickly. When the Buddha spoke, everything is mind only, because the mind-only people said to Chandrakirti, that's all fine and good about your higher view, but the Buddha kept saying it's all in your mind. It's mind only, and we follow the true Buddha's path, because the Buddha said that. So that, what mind only really means, there's a negative and a positive. It says that it didn't come from some creative being judging you and deciding. Yeah, the Buddha tried to say it's in your mind, but the experience is experienced through your mind. That's where things are. But he didn't mean it literally like the mind-only school took it, according to the present people. He's saying, if you really want to play the game properly, you want to play it in your mind. Don't give responsibility outside of yourself. There's nothing there that will change. If you throw it out there, it's guilt or something you cannot help. It is just a rolling over of intention and creation, your mind experiencing itself through some nominal stuff out there, but any contact with that stuff is just an opportunity for the mind to experience itself in all the flavors that it's in the real sense. Yeah? So he said when he was asked it's mind only, he said Tokpe, is that there? Yeah, Tokpe taksam. By your own conception is Tokpe, and taksam is just labeled. So he said, and this is where the prasangika view comes in, the world is what you label it. Not a choice, okay? This is But once the flowering is happening, you have no choice. If the boss yelling at you is a suffering, no sitting there going, I wish it wasn't, I wish it wasn't, I wish it wasn't, will stop it being a suffering. Because as soon as you recognize that it's a suffering and you wished it wasn't, it's already a suffering. Yeah? So, important to understand. Mind is the main thing. From its own ignorance it appears. And then, lastly, for those of you who are following your reading, if you're not, I really encourage you to do for this class. Go and have a look at the sutra requested by Upali, which talks about a splash of pleasing flowers over their petals, etc., etc. It's talking quite beautifully about how the world is how you label it. So, chew on these ideas. You've been given 3 presentations from 3 different points of view about how our worlds come to us. There is stuff out there. Some say there isn't. Can you verify? The only thing you can really be certain of is that something called your consciousness is interpreting the data. And that interpretation, the cognition of those shapes and colors into a full experience is within your grasp. You can choose how to manipulate that if you operate at the DNA level of consciousness. If you try and interact with a self-existent boss, you're at a loss. You're like thinking that water creates apple trees. And that's a factor that it doesn't produce apple trees. It's a specific seed that produces apple trees. You want cherry blossoms? You can cherry blossoms. It's very big.
Sashi Puti Jishin Metotram Viram Linchi Nidvegan Padi Sange Shindu Mite Vagi Drokun Nanda Shinla Jupasho Idam Guru Ratnamandala Kandiryatayami Kiva Dvijyoku Sunam Yashe Sotsokshin Sunam Yashe Lejunwe Dhampar Kuni Topasho.
And I hope you push forward the intention of listening to this class and all the implications of radically transforming your world, and push it out to as many beings on the planet, in your world, that you can. Just with your intention, you can multiply this, the goodness that we did by trying to figure out where things come from. I hope they multiply. Cheers. Cheers.
Your announcement?
Yes. Cheers.
You want me to make this announcement?
Yes, please. Sorry, quick announcement.
Quick announcement.